All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores. I know I'm late. I had all my notes ready, but I was just too busy, and then I was just too tired to do this video. But I'm waking up at 5 something in the morning to bring y'all the day 3 clips and analysis of the 2024 Washington Commanders training camp. We have a lot of things to talk about. Apparently, Emanuel Forbes is 17 pounds heavier. Jaden Daniels threw his first interception, but bounced back big time. Rookie offensive tackle Brandon Coleman started today. Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu leading the linebacker core in drills. Jeremy McNichols is emerging as the 3rd best running back potentially. The defensive line looks explosive and energetic. And we even have picture proof for the Emanuel Forbes 17-pound gain. And you even have a Cameron Curl shout out as well. We're going to dive into all that and more. Of course, we're going to get into every single position group: quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, all the way down the defensive line. We even have a special teams update, thank goodness. So we're gonna get there as well, because our kicker situation, woo-wee, and technically it's a little bit of bad news with the kicker situation, but we'll get there. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned, follow the content. Again, I have y'all updated on every single training camp practice, no matter what. Even if something delays it to where I have to do it the very next morning, y'all are going to get a breakdown of every training camp practice that we have access to, because there are more than likely going to be some that they shut down. Nobody knows what happened. We'll get no clips, we'll get no analysis or anything like that. But any day that's like the past 3 practices where we get any information, any clips from it, I got y'all with these hour-long breakdowns. Make sure y'all stay tuned. And again, I'm cooking up some call-in show live streams, so those are on the way soon. I'll keep y'all updated on that, and I really appreciate y'all. Let's go ahead and dive into this video, man. Let's get it. Adam. And before we dive into this video, shouts out to my boy William Hicks for the big time donation to the Cash App. We have those going again in the spirit of football coming back. I love it. Speaking of the spirit of football coming back, my boy Hey Scotty always donating as well. Shouts out to him for the big time donation as well. And he said, because football is in the air. That was all the donation was for. I appreciate that love big time. That's big love right there, both from both of y'all, William Hicks and my boy Hey Scotty. Appreciate those donations big time through the Cash App. Much love. Now let's get into this breakdown. All right, so before we even get into everything going on in practice, as you can see on the screen right now, John Com tweeted a video of everybody just stretching and seeing what the environment looks like with the multiple fields and things like that. And then, as you can see on the screen right now, you also have Adam Peters and assistant GM Lance Newmark watching the 3rd practice of training camp as well. They're over there just, evaluating their team. I mean, it's probably a little bit of like, not just work, but also a little bit of celebration. Like, hey man, this is what we produced. I can't wait to see what it looks like on the field. We put all of the chess pieces in place. Maybe not all, like 99%, because you never know. We're probably going to acquire some people through the waiver wire. Again, just to remind you, like we talked about a couple of days ago, we are 2nd in waiver wire priority. So if there's a player cut from another team and that enters the waiver wire, only the Panthers have priority over us. If we want that player, we're more than likely going to get that player. So don't be surprised if we're active in the waiver wire for a kicker, for an offensive tackle, who knows. But again, for the most part, a lot of the pieces are already in place, and now they just kind of get to see the seeds that they laid, what they produce as actual plants. I can't wait to see how fruitful this season basically is. And then also, before we get into all of the practice stuff, shouts out to JP Finley for this tweet right here, for this picture. Some of the gear that will be available for fans to purchase at camp, including a Jaden Daniels kids jersey. Here are the pictures as you can see on the screen. And hey man, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna have to get me at least one of them hats. I'm gonna have to pull up and get one of those jerseys for sure. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really rocking with the black ones. I'm not gonna lie, I might have to pull up and get that Terry McLaurin black one and one of them hats to match. I ain't gonna lie. I may even get a foam finger. I ain't gonna lie about that one either. But yeah, man, let's go ahead and dive into practice. So first of all, injury update wise, apparently Andrew Wiley, our projected starting right tackle, sat out several drives in the second half of practice, but he says that he's all good. We haven't gotten an update from any of the coaches, but the coaches typically, like Dan Quinn, typically speaks before practice, so maybe we'll get an Andrew Wiley update today, July 27th on Saturday, if we're having a practice. The beginning of next practice, we'll hear from Dan Quinn, because after practice is when you hear from players, and we didn't hear from Andrew Wiley himself, I don't believe. So we just got to wait for that update. Even though it doesn't sound like it's too bad, probably still gonna have to wait for that update. And I also don't know if this was due to injuries or not, but undrafted free agent defensive backs Chigi Anusium and Tyler Owens were not at practice today. Well, yesterday, as in Friday, July 26th, day 3 of practice. And y'all, again, I don't know why, but Tyler Owens is like a super freak athlete alien that I'm super rooting for. And I'm happy to hear that he's been killing it on special teams so far, but I don't know what happened with him and Chiggy today. Hoping to get an update soon on that as well. Maybe, again, the beginning of the next practice, since that's when Dan Quinn speaks. Dan Quinn doesn't speak after practices, so we don't know what his opinions or any of his updates are until we're about to start the next one. And then, speaking of Dan Quinn, let's talk about some things from the coaches today, mostly Dan Quinn. So Dan Quinn on day 3 said that they're going to work on more red zone work, new competition drills at the end of practice, and as far as Jaden Daniels, he's doing an outstanding job and they are really pleased with him. So that was going into the day 3 practice, and just basically he's going to keep updating you on like what are some of the scenarios that we're focusing on, because we're not just practicing out there and just doing whatever. There's specific things that they're focused on, and it seems like it's been red zone drills every day so far in training camp, but they're also bringing in additional things as well, new wrinkles to the practice. It's never just the same exact practice day by day, but red zone is and clock management and all of those type of things are kind of like the overarching theme so far of the first 3 days. Then also Jonathan Allen said on Wednesday, quote, "A lot of guys with a lot to prove and I love it," unquote. Basically talking about the whole entire organization, especially the roster, the mentality of the team right now. Everybody has something to prove. Everybody's really excited. Then you also had Dan Quinn that before the start of Friday's practice, day 3 of training camp, said, quote, "I would say his coach has something to prove as well," unquote. And he extended the prove it part to Adam Peters, rest of the building, and everybody. And basically Dan Quinn is saying that I love the fact that the players have that mentality, but it's not just the players, it's us and the coaching staff and those people in the front office as well that all feel like they have something big time to prove. I mean, even with as much praise as Adam Peters has gotten, this is his first general manager job. So of course he's going to come out here. He has a lot to prove as well. You can't forget that Dan Quinn, the last time he was a head coach, some people considered it a failure. So he has a lot to prove. Everybody here has something big time to prove. Even Brandon Sosna, with him looking like the Sean McVay of front office guys, he still has a lot to prove as well. Every single person here has a lot to prove. Anthony Lynn is probably the person that has the least to prove here, because I mean, leaving the 49ers with the number 1 run game, with the best running back in the NFL and Christian McCaffrey, to come here, you know, it's not like he's necessarily taking a demotion and trying to work his way back up or anything like that. Maybe he is, who knows, but I feel like even he has something to prove. Now, also moving on, Dan Quinn said that some of the best moments in life come when you have something to prove, and we've all got a lot to prove here. I love that mentality. That's a great point. Dan Quinn also shouts out to Mitch Tisler for pointing out the fact that he has a lot of self-awareness and honesty to him that is a breath of fresh air that we haven't necessarily been seeing here the past few years, really in a long time. And then also Dan Quinn said that day 3 of training camp will feature more red zone work, though in the form of like a drill we haven't seen before. So that was really interesting before we even got into practice, and some more game management scenarios as well. And then also throughout the practice, we noticed that the offense was prioritizing runs a lot to start the day. They had plays by Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, and even Jaden Daniels was getting off with his legs a little bit as well. We're going to get to that soon when we talk about the quarterbacks. Zach Selby said that it's still really early, but this run game could be a lot of fun to watch. I completely agree. I mean, the run game elements from just the quarterback, the running backs, and even Terry McLaurin, he's trying to work on his yards after catch, so maybe he can get the ball out of the backfield. You have Luke McCaffrey already cross-training, going from, I mean, of course, he's mostly a wide receiver, but he's already been working with Anthony Lynn to work on getting handoffs out of the backfield, because that's an art in itself. And then with his elite athleticism, hey man, that may be something growing there. The run game element to our team could end up being really great. And then also also Andrew Wiley spoke after practice, and well, like it wasn't like an official press conference. People just came up to him with microphones, and the Commanders right tackle gave some high praise to the new coaching staff and their training camp schedule specifically. He said, quote, "This is my 8th training camp in the NFL. This is kind of the first time that a recovery period has been on the schedule," unquote. So, and Logan Paulson even talked about this on the podcast that he has with Craig Hoffman, and basically this is a very refreshing way that Dan Quinn and these guys are running the training camp, because this is not typical of the NFL, to where like they basically go full out in segments, and then they also have like breaks or something like that, rather than it being just kind of like a mundane same tempo the whole time. It's kind of like an up and down situation where you're maximizing the efficiency while guys also have time to recover and things like that. So I don't know the exact details of it, but apparently Andrew Wiley loves it. Logan Paulson, as a former player, said that he would have loved to have experienced that as well. So just know that it's something great. Now also, day 3 of training camp, the first player on the field this time was Bryson Tremaine. So he was the first player out there day 1. Then day 2 it was Jaden Daniels and Sam Hartman, and then day 3 is Bryson Tremaine again to come back and claim his crown. But just to let you know, Jaden Daniels and Sam Hartman were right behind him. So it seems to be like it's always going to be either Bryson Tremaine or the duo of Jaden Daniels and Sam Hartman at the same time, literally side by side. They're going to be the first guys out there at every practice of training camp. That's just what it seems like it's going to be. And then, of course, to start practice, we have the bags drill to set it off with all of the hype, the players, the coaches. Again, every time they do this, I feel like they're going to do this every practice, so I'm going to show y'all this every breakdown. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if we're even doing this to start off joint practices and then the other team just watching, like, what is going on here type of situation. So I'm super excited to see how the Jets and the Dolphins react to that once we get to those joint practices. But again, every day that we get a clip of them doing this is a day that I'll include that clip in my breakdown and analysis of the day. Now, moving on to the quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels was doing some interesting drills before practice even really got going. Like, I mean, there was this one drill where, I mean, he was right on the money. He even yelled to the staffers, make sure they got the video and make sure they give it to him so he can upload it to Instagram. He was really proud of the situation. Here's a better angle of it as well. Matter of fact, how about another angle? Because it is really impressive. I mean, that boy can throw the ball, man, especially on the run. I mean, this is the first day that they're really trying to incorporate quarterback scrambling and throwing the ball on the run and things like that. And you can see it in the back-to-back reps here that this man can really throw on the run. Again, these are back-to-back reps. These are not one throw, one attempt, and then time in between and then the next one. These are back-to-back reps. And you can tell that the offensive coaches are definitely trying to ramp up and get these quarterbacks moving now, because they were doing all kinds of throws on the run today, whether it was at a target or a receiver. And now let's talk about what Jaden Daniels did in practice today. So Jaden Daniels was back with the first team during an 11-on-11 drill, so he was a starter for a lot of today, if not the entire day today. He was mostly the starter the first day, then it was Marcus Mariota day 2, and then it was Jaden Daniels day 3. And Zach Selby pointed out the fact that although Daniels' day wasn't as crisp as the first 2 practices, he still had some solid moments. He completed his first 6 passes of 7-on-7 drills, hitting Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Austin Eckler with his first throws. It seemed like the connection was pretty much just uncoverable at a certain point. He had that first slip up, and then after that he bounced back and he was good to go, because Jaden Daniels did throw his first pick of the training camp session, and it was on an in-breaking route that cornerback Michael Davis jumped on. So hey man, just smart veteran savvy move by the veteran there, by Michael Davis, who's coming from the Chargers. He's been there, done that. In 2022 he looked like one of the best corners in the NFL, arguably at least a top 15 machine corner, so we shouldn't necessarily be surprised that he's making plays, and we also shouldn't be surprised and overthink and overreact to the fact that Jaden Daniels has thrown his first interception at training camp, because he's more than likely going to throw another one. But my boy Linnell pointed out the fact that Jaden Daniels bounced back very nicely from that interception. He was sharp during 7-on-7 work, like Zach Selby said as well, and Linnell said that the ball didn't even hit the ground. Completions to Eckler, McLaurin, and Dotson, like Zach Selby said. And my boy Serge the Shooter over there also said that Daniels in 7-on-7 was just so decisive. The ball was coming out quick, in stride each and every time, and he basically said that he never saw a late rep the whole time. Jaden Daniels was on point. It was like literally the interception sparked something, and then from there he was super on point. And then Zach Selby also pointed out the fact that the Commanders are continuing to ramp up their process. And the day started with more emphasis on running the ball. Both Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler had solid runs up the middle of the defense, but the most exciting moment came when Jaden Daniels pulled the ball and took off down the left sideline, down the left side of the field. Though scrambling is not a central part of his skill set, it's another wrinkle that should make it more difficult to defend him if he uses it at the right moment. I completely agree, man. Jaden Daniels using his leg, I don't know. I really don't know how you can actually game plan against that and defend against that. So I'm really excited about how that's going to look once he really adds that wrinkle to his game. You saw it a lot in college, but I really want to emphasize that this is a guy that is a quarterback that throws, that can run, not a running quarterback that can throw. And so, man, him being able to run is just an additional skill, but it's a very potent and big time additional skill as well. Linnell also pointed out the fact that Jaden Daniels was showing off his wheels for the first time in this camp. He kept one on a zone read and was a blur, basically, and nobody had a chance of getting him. I'm loving what I'm hearing there. And then we also have some Jaden Daniels interviews after practice, and he said a lot of really interesting things that if you're not sold on them yet, at least be sold on the mentality, on the work ethic, the things behind the scenes that you may not even necessarily see on the field, but they're going to help translate to how well he performs on the field as well. So first of all, Daniels said that there's a lot of different voices in the quarterback room, but they're all preaching the same things and delivering the same messages. So you have a lot of different viewpoints, a lot of different voices, but at the same time, we're all on the same page. So it sounds like the best of both worlds situation. Jaden Daniels also said that his process to get into the facility early has not changed. He's always there early, as you can tell by the fact that he and Sam Hartman were at practice first out of everybody else getting on the field the second day. And then they were right behind Bryson Tremaine the third day, the day that we're discussing and breaking down today. He said that that's literally just who he is. That's what he's always going to be. It's not just like a rookie thing, like a facade, like this is my first year in the NFL. This is what I'm going to do to make people believe in me early on something like that. No, this is just something that he does and that he will do. So you might as well just go ahead and get used to it. That boy Jaden Daniels is always going to be at the facilities very early. I'm assuming Luke McCaffrey's probably still doing it with him because he was doing it with them in voluntary OTAs, which is why you would get CJ Stroud to Tank Bell, similarities and comparisons from those two. And then Daniels also talked about not being the starter yet. He said, quote, "I'm a competitor. I love competing. Doesn't matter to me," unquote. And I love it because he's not one of those people that's trying too hard. I absolutely love Jaden Daniels' personality because some quarterbacks will be like, man, this is what I'm meant to be. This is what I'm supposed to do. They dive too far into it. Jaden Daniels is kind of like, I'm going to just go out there and show them. It's like a more calm confidence of, I'm going to go out there and show them. They'll see, like, I am the starting quarterback. I know I'm the starting quarterback, but, we'll get there. I'll just prove it through action. I don't necessarily need to talk about it too much. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's announced that he's the starter very soon, though. I ain't going to lie, because especially after the day that Marcus Mariota had in the practice of day 3, Friday, July 26th, man, there's no point of even hiding it anymore, Quinn, at this point. I understand what Quinn is doing. I see his side of it, but Mariota was bad enough today, even with Jaden Daniels' interception, to where you might as well just go ahead and make that announcement now. We might as well go ahead and come out to the 4th practice. Jaden Daniels is a starter, and let's move forward with that information, man. And also, talking about not being named the starter yet, Daniels said that he loves competing. You can't go out there and be comfortable, he said. Can't control when he's named the starter, but he can control how hard he can compete. I love that mentality a lot. And he also said that he's not trying to think too much so that he can and play faster. And that is a very veteran, nuanced, mature way to look at the game of football. The quicker that you can do rather than the thinking less is a big component to mastering football. When the game slows down for you, you're not overthinking things. That's like the big growing pain from guys going from the college level to the NFL level. No matter how talented they are, it's the speed of the game, and the fact that he's already looking that far ahead. Love it. And then he was also asked about avoiding unnecessary hits during games. This was a big time question here, and his answer basically included being smart, knowing when to throw the ball away. Thank you for that. Trying to eliminate first and second down sacks. That's very important. You don't want to fall behind the sticks. Always knowing where your hot answers are. So when in doubt, panic situation, everything is just chaotic. Who are the guys that you can depend on being open at a certain point in time and where they are? That's big time. That's very key. He also said that he wants to avoid getting hit by free rushers any way possible. So that's getting the ball out sooner. That's maybe moving a little bit to the side to avoid them. Like as soon as you snap the ball, you know the free rush is coming from the left side just based on the protections because they're sending so many people. So just basically after you snap the ball, how about slide to the right just a little bit? You know what I'm saying? So I love the fact that he's already thinking about things like that. These are very nuanced, veteran-like things that your rookie quarterback that hasn't thrown a single pass to the NFL level yet in a regular season game is already concerned about and thinking about. And the coaches, he also mentioned that the coaches are doing a great job of giving them answers to the test. So again, going back to the fact that he does not to overthink things, that's on him, but that's also on the coaching staff, especially Cliff Kingsbury being the offensive coordinator, to make things easier for him. And it seems like we have a good balance of that so far, but we got to see what it actually looks like on the field. And then Jaden Daniels also talked about how training camp is always a progression, talking about like shells, pads, joint practices, preseason games, and things like that, how things just slowly ramp up. And Jaden Daniels basically said that he's really looking forward to those situations. He can't wait to basically get to each next step, each next milestone and obstacle. He said, quote, "It's a learning curve, and I'm excited to go out there and learn. If I fail a little bit, learn from it," unquote. Love the personality, love the mentality here. You know, so you're not going to always be perfect, but you're going to learn from it. You're going to bounce back. It's not something to beat yourself up about and really just hamper down on and be all, you know, let it affect you negatively moving forward. And then Jaden Daniels, of course, with him being physically gifted, they asked him, how does he work on the mental aspect of this game on and off the field? And he said, quote, "It's a long taxing season, and if you don't take care of your mental, it can be a rough season for you." Again, another very veteran-like quote, man. This guy is wise beyond his years, man. I'm telling you, he has the personality. He has the mentality that you need. And speaking of personality, I love the fact that he's always smiling and dancing like in this clip here. And we have a lot of clips like these from voluntary OTAs as well. Now, I don't know what that gritty attempt actually was. It was quite terrible, but he's not from Louisiana. I mean, he played there for 2 years, but he ain't from there. So, and that's probably not his jig to, you know, learn a dance like that. But it is what it is. I just thought it was funny that he even tried. I mean, that was almost as bad as, was that Samuel Cosme who tried it, I believe, one time in that game when we scored that touchdown. But moving on, apparently Sam Hartman had a great day today. Marcus Mariota had a down day. Jaden Daniels had that one interception and then balled out for the rest of it. But apparently Sam Hartman was pretty solid all day today. And so again, I just want to let you know that Marcus Mariota, bad day. Don't overreact necessarily, but it just seems like it's already a wrap, man. Go ahead and get Jaden Daniels going, man. Go ahead and get going. And some of the offensive players had some down moments as well. It wasn't just a Marcus Mariota bad day thing, because at one point we had a rough stretch for the first team offense. Marcus Mariota was out of rhythm, and then he basically dirted a couple of throws straight to the ground. And then you also had drops from Jahan Dotson and Brian Robinson at times. Now, speaking of Brian Robinson, running back wise, we apparently had some pretty good runs today from both guys. And here's some of the footage of Austin Eckler catching the ball underneath out of the backfield. And then right here, you have Brian Robinson talking to Anthony Lynn. And hey, man, coach him up, Lynn. Coach him up. Brian Robinson soak up any and every piece of knowledge that he has to give. Because not only was this guy a former head coach, but again, he was the architect, at least one of the main components of the #1 run game last year in the entire NFL with the San Francisco 49ers, with their run game, the way that they set up blocks, the way, of course, from the running back point of view of things, the Christian McCaffrey point of view and things like that. So Brian Robinson soak up every bit of knowledge that you can get from Anthony Lynn. I love that. But again, just to remind you that we did have some ups and downs. You had a drop from Brian Robinson and a drop from Jahan Dotson today. It's not something to necessarily overreact about, but it is interesting. Then you also have David Harrison of Sports Illustrated. He did his breakdown and basically talked about the 3 most noticeable things from practice, and one of them was that we finally have an emerging back here. We already know Brian Robinson and Austin Ekeler are 1 and 2 and basically neck and neck. There's no 1, there's no 2. They're basically the same guy. They're just both the lead backs, the two-headed monster basically. David Harrison said in his article, Jeremy McNichols is a name Commanders fans are going to want to familiarize themselves with. Not that he's positioned himself to steal snaps from either Brian Robinson Jr. or Austin Ekeler, but he's a lot of people's favorite to land the 3rd running back job. In competition with 2nd-year running back Chris Rodriguez, who flashed impressively towards the end of last season, McNichols came to Washington after spending 2023 with the San Francisco 49ers. He and Rodriguez have both gotten solid reps so far, but it's been McNichols making more standout plays, including a touchdown catch yesterday and today, well, as in yesterday as in Thursday, and then today as in Friday during team portions of practice. So this guy has been a touchdown magnet, basically, the Austin Ekeler effect. And the main reason I wanted to bring this up is because it seems like, even just based on the moves that we made in the offseason, every running back we brought in through free agency, a 3rd down receiving back type of guy. All of the running backs we brought in as undrafted free agents, because we didn't draft a running back, but all of the undrafted free agents, all of those guys were 3rd down receiving back type of guys, Austin Ekeler mode. So it seems like they're already leaning that way, just based on them projecting their needs and their priorities just off of who they brought in during the offseason, free agency, and right after the draft as undrafted free agent. So I already felt like Jeremy McNichols probably had an advantage over Chris Rodriguez just there alone. Chris Rodriguez just happened to be somebody that's still here, that was on contract from the previous regime. They were going to give him his opportunity, but I wouldn't be surprised if they preferred Jeremy McNichols over Chris Rodriguez just simply because of scheme. But then on top of that, Jeremy McNichols is out there also making more plays and standing out more than Chris Rodriguez. It may not be over with yet, but the writing seems to be on the wall. Just to let you know, you heard it here first. Again, shouts out to David Harrison of Sports Illustrated. Make sure you give him his credit, but don't be surprised if Jeremy McNichols is your 3rd running back, and also don't be surprised if we only keep 3 running backs. Maybe we keep 4, but if we only keep 3, you can pretty much assume that the training camp battle there, that's one of the ones that's already probably been decided, or at the very least, Jeremy McNichols has a big lead there. Now, also, let's move on to the wide receivers, because again, Jahan Dotson had a drop earlier, but he still had a good day overall. But I just want to point these things out. I don't want to be the guy that's always super optimistic and super positive. There are bad plays. I'm going to let you know there are bad plays, at least from the information that I have. But moving on to the receivers, Olamide Zaccheaus had a really great catch today down the right sideline with a defender hanging all over him, and it was a good throw by Sam Hartman. And I'm not gonna lie, Olamide Zaccheaus, he was making a lot of plays in voluntary OTAs and mandatory minicamps. And so this wide receiver group is really interesting to me, because the only automatic locks are Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Luke McCaffrey. That's it. Everybody else is competing against each other to make this final roster. We have battles in every position group right now, not gonna lie. I mean, because even like on the defensive line wise, we have a lot of great interior defensive line talent, but who's gonna get those last few spots with John Ridgeway and Fedarian Mathis and all of those guys? We'll get there later. But and we'll talk about that for another day. We'll probably I may do like a whole video breakdown of like updated training camp battles, who's winning right now, maybe like a imaginary depth chart or something like that even the Commanders haven't thought to put together yet, but just based on what we're hearing in practice so far, kind of like an update of where we're at, who's winning, who looks like they're more likely to make the team. Maybe we'll do something like that soon. Maybe one of these days that they don't actually practice or we don't have access to practice, I'll have some time to do that. But my point is, the wide receiver group outside of the top 3, pure competition. De'Ami Brown is the best blocker out of the wide receiver group and has some deep threat ability. We'll see there. Jamison Crowder is your starting punt returner from last year and probably is right now until somebody dethrones him. But hey, man, Kazim Allen's like, I have something to say about that. Then you have Bryson Tremaine. He's the only tall receiver on the team. Luke McCaffrey, outside of Bryson Tremaine, is the tallest receiver on the team at 6'2". Bryson Tremaine is 6'5". Then you have my Georgia dog, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, who was balling out in rookie mini camps before he hurt his hamstring. And then there are also so many other guys in the mix as well. But again, Olamide Zaccheaus is a guy that's been sticking out for a while. But you also have Davion Davis, who we brought in through free agency, and Sam Fortier did a pretty good job of breaking them down in this Washington Post article. He said the 27-year-old veteran doesn't fit the Commanders' rebuild timeline, but early in camp, the 5'11", 195-pound wideout has stood out. He has taken some first team reps even. And during their second team reps together, Jaden Daniels has looked for him very often, including a situational drill to set up a short field goal. Since going undrafted out of Sam Houston State in 2019, Davis has appeared in only 4 NFL games, which makes the odds he'll make the team seem long, but he has repped like a real contender so far. So this is a name to keep in the back of your mind. Olamide Zaccheaus making plays, especially in voluntary OTAs. And Davion Davis, I don't know how he ended up working up to getting first team reps, or even when he's out there with the second team, he's out there with Jaden Daniels. I don't know what he's done to gain that level of trust from the coaching staff, but he's making the most of it. When he's out there with the starters, when he's out there with Jaden Daniels, again, apparently Jaden Daniels is looking towards him often. So, hey, man, don't be surprised. Davion Davis may be a guy that you can pencil in making the roster. I wouldn't write it in pen, but maybe you can pencil it in right now. And then you also have the wide receivers working against different type of press coverages and things like that, and working over their release packages. Thank you, because we need every little detail we can get going with that. And then tight end wise, we don't have any major news. I didn't see any clips or any updates on anybody in the tight end room, so I apologize for that. We're going to go ahead and move on to the offensive line part of this video. And so the Commanders offensive line, the first major thing to talk about with the offensive line was the fact that Brandon Coleman was getting first team reps at right tackle, while at times Cornelius Lucas was the starting left tackle. And that was basically the offensive line look for the entire day 3 of training camp. Now, is this just like a developmental process for him, or was this just simply a case of Wiley getting a little banged up like we talked about earlier, and Brandon Coleman just replaced them at right tackle just for today? I mean, Trent Scott even at some point got some first team reps today with Wiley sitting out. But my main point is, like with Andrew Wiley at right tackle, I personally prefer, with Brandon Coleman, the rookie, 3rd round rookie at right tackle today, my thing is, I personally prefer Andrew Wiley at right tackle with Brandon Coleman that is ready to start at left tackle. Like, he's ready, not just forcing them there at left tackle. I feel like that's our best case scenario that we have to work with what we currently have on the roster right now, over having a guy like Cornelius Lucas starting at left tackle and then Brandon Coleman at right tackle. I prefer Brandon Coleman at left, Andrew Wiley at right. I just personally don't trust Lucas at left tackle. I just, especially that last game of the season against Dallas, boy, I could be wrong, but either way, back to Coleman. Zach Selby talked about Brandon Coleman and said that he continues to show improvement working at left tackle. There were even times he got some reps at left tackle as well. His quickness and arm length have been praised as 2 of his best attributes. Love that. That's big time. Those are things that you really can't teach. You can't teach foot quickness and arm length. You can work on a lot of other things. You can coach up certain things. Some other things may come with time and reps. You can't teach length. And it's really extremely hard to teach foot quickness. And both were needed while working against Dante Fowler in 11-on-11 drills at some point in practice. He stayed engaged with the defensive end throughout the play, keeping himself between Fowler and the quarterback. And I really want to point out the fact that Dante Fowler is coming off of his best statistical season of his career last year. So this is not just a slouch that we're talking about in Dante Fowler. He may not necessarily be Khalil Mack or Von Miller in their primes, but it is still Dante Fowler. He's still a really good player. He may have never lived up to the draft pick that he was chosen, but again, he's coming off of his best statistical season last year, and so this guy had something clicked for him. Even though he's getting up there in age, he may be a little past his prime, something clicked, and if Brandon Coleman's blocking well against him, that's big news. But it's not just Dante Fowler. I mean, if you don't trust the Dante Fowler hype I just sold you on, how about Frankie Louvu? There was at some point in the practice where Brandon Coleman did a great job of moving his feet versus Frankie Louvu in the pass rush situation. Now, we know Brandon Coleman is way bigger than Frankie Louvu, so if there's a situation where Frankie Louvu's trying to bull rush him, you kind of expect Brandon Coleman to win that. But the fact that it was like a speed thing, it was an agility thing, where Brandon Coleman did a great job of moving his feet to stay in front of him, where it was more of like a side-to-side, not necessarily a strength thing, but using his length in his foot like we just talked about. And I mean, that's very impressive to me. Those are great things to hear, because again, we need Brandon Coleman starting at left tackle yesterday. Hopefully he will be ready by week 1. I still wouldn't bank on it, but we are hearing some positive things as far as his development going that route. And then you also have Brandon Coleman getting some post-practice work with Bobby Johnson personally. And Mitch Tisler pointed out the fact that lots of these coaches are staying after to get extra work with their guys, just like we talked about in the day 2 breakdown. Technically not yesterday, the day before yesterday, but either way, these guys are staying after really long after practice consistently, man. And it's not just one coach, it's not just one player. George Carmi brings up a great point, and again, we talked about this in my previous breakdown of the day 2 of practice. The Commanders coaching staff seem to be very hands-on this year. It's clear that they are embracing that teaching role for real. They talked about that early in the offseason, that they actually plan on teaching these players and like really being hands-on. It's been apparent with Cliff Kingsbury and Daryl Tapp as well. They spent so much time after practice just talking to players. You saw Jason Simmons do it and after day 2 of practice with Emanuel Forbes, where they could easily just be going home and spending time with their families right now, going to get something to eat. They're tired, you know what I'm saying? But they're staying after practice for who knows how long and just having one-on-one time with additional players. I'm loving what I'm seeing. And then also, before we move on from the offensive line, I like this drill right here where you see them really striking and then going up to the second level defender. You can tell that this run game, if you didn't believe me earlier about this run game being pretty potent, believe me now when you see the offensive line specifically working on drills to get to the next level to allow the run game to get more yards. They're trying to get up there and block linebackers and DBs, and they want these guys mobile enough to do that. Now moving on to the defensive line. First of all, look at the energy in this rep from both the player and the coach, man. It's infectious. Makes you want to get up there and start doing something. I love the fact that in this clip, Jonathan Allen and Daryl Tapp are getting after it like this. And these are two guys that have been staying after practice to talk longer, to discuss some things. And you've been seeing Daryl Tapp's hands-on approach. You saw from the breakdown of day 2 of practice, where Daryl Tapp was like, you saw a defensive lineman get one, I think it was John Ridgway, do one rep. It was all right. Then Daryl Tapp and Sharif Floyd step in and say, do this, change this in your stance. And then immediately the next rep is way more explosive. You can see a huge difference in the rep, and so you already see the coaching, and then this level of energy between, Jonathan Allen looks like he's fresh out of Alabama again with the energy that he has in this rep. They're bringing the energy. They're figuring out how to. Dan Quinn made this point when he first got hired, before we even thought about practice yet. He emphasized that every coach needs to learn how to teach each individual player, how to teach their room and things like that. It's not just the head coach, physical coordinators, positional coaches. It's assistant positional coaches as well. Everybody needs to learn how to coach each guy, and apparently the defensive line in general, or at the very least Jonathan Allen, prefers a very energetic practice environment, and I'm not sure if he ever got that before, but he's getting it now. And also shouts out to Linnell for pointing this out. He said it's super refreshing sight to see the Commanders defensive line working on stunts and games up front right now. Something we haven't seen much of the past 4 seasons. That is excellent, man. I love the fact that we're already working on those as of day 3 of training camp. Let's get those stunts down to perfection, because that was one weakness that we had, that even when Jack Del Rio tried to use stunts, the chemistry just wasn't there. Montez Sweat, Chase Young, and trying to gain that chemistry with the interior defensive lineman and Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, it just seemed like we started to get better over time throughout the regular season. How about we get better throughout the offseason, so by the time week 1 of the regular season comes, we already got it down packed? And just best believe we will run a lot of stunts. Last year, Dan Quinn ran more stunts for the Dallas Cowboys defense than any other team in the NFL. You're going to see a lot of stunts. This is not a lazy coaching staff on offense nor defense. These guys are going to put these players in positions to succeed as often as possible. They're not just going to say, hey, go out there, we're going to call this play for you, 4-3 cover 2 or something like that, man coverage, and you just go out there and use your talent to win. No, Dan Quinn is going to ask you to stunt often. We're going to ask you to do all kinds of strategic things, because talent is one thing, but strategy is a whole nother. And football is a game of chess. And so if we're throwing in stunts and throwing offensive linemen all out of their game, and even no matter how talented they are, if they're not ready, we're going to win those reps and potentially get tackles for losses and sacks just because of those alone, confusing the offense. Or even if we're known as a team that's always running stunts, and Dan Quinn didn't say this specifically, but this is just Rico of RicoScores talking. If we're known as a team that's always running stunts, offensive linemen are eventually going to overthink it, and then they're going to start to play a little bit more passive, wondering like, okay, is this about to be another one of those stunts that's coming? And then we don't run the stunt, and we just run at them head first right through their chest, and now they're backing up and they're in passive mode because they're looking out for a potential stunt. We can take advantage of them that way as well. So offensive linemen are basically going to have headaches preparing for this defensive line just off of that alone. We may not have necessarily the most talented edge rusher group in the NFL, not by a mile at all. We're not even, I would even say we're in the top half of the league as far as edge rusher talent, but best believe we're still going to be very productive, because Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. are elite at manufacturing pressure and finding creative ways to get their defense to produce results. And then also, Man, Johnny Newton's first step looks explosive in this clip right here, man. I mean, really fast, which is even more amazing when you remember the fact that he just had surgeries in both of his feet this offseason. So this explosion that you're seeing is coming from a guy, not only this just huge, he's a defensive tackle, but also the fact that this is a guy that's coming off of feet surgeries. Like, I mean, he wasn't just 100% leading up to this training camp, really. So yeah, that's just amazing in itself. Now moving on to the linebackers, you see Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu leading every drill. It's always Bobby Wagner first leading off the drill. Frankie Louvu is immediately after him, and basically they do this over and over again throughout practice. It's very clear that Bobby Wagner is the leader and the mentor to even Frankie Louvu, and then those guys as a duo are basically the mentors for everybody else behind them. And we already talked about in the day 2 breakdown of practice how much Jordan McGee is developing and how quickly he's maturing, and we should expect big things out of him being basically linebacker 3 in that group. It's Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, and then Jordan McGee right now in that linebacker group. So we'll see how that goes. And then moving on to the defensive backs, again, to remind you, Jaden Daniels threw his first interception of the training camp session, or basically off season, and he was targeting Davion Davis on the play, but cornerback Michael Davis made a break on the ball and came down with the pick. Again, I want to point out the fact that Davion Davis was the target, and we talked about earlier how Jaden Daniels has been targeting him a lot, whether he's out there with the second stringers or even the first stringers. Davion Davis has been getting a lot of looks. Jaden Daniels for some reason trusts this guy. He's been making plays, but on this time, this particular rep, Michael Davis got the best of both of them and just did a great job of making a break on the ball. It was like a veteran nuanced move, kind of like I've seen this before, I'm gonna go ahead and trust my instincts and react to it. Because if he would have missed, he would have missed big time. It's probably a touchdown for Davion Davis, but Michael Davis out there, Davis on Davis crime there, making a great veteran play. So even though Michael Davis has technically been with the second string defense, because Forbes and St. Juice have been with the starters at outside corner for the most part that I've been seeing, Michael Davis is still making plays. And if we're being honest, his best season at the NFL level is easily the best season of any outside corner we have on this team right now. Mike Davis's 2022 season was literally like a top 15 corner level, but the Chargers changed defensive coordinators going into the 2023 season, and they completely set him up for failure, which I do not fault him for as well. I'm happy, if anything, that it happened because we were able to get him for so cheap. So don't be surprised if Mike Davis impresses, because this is a guy that was looking like a really good corner in 2022. I don't think that guy is gone. I just feel like it was misused and misguided in 2023. So my main point is, do not sleep on Mike Davis, especially when he's making plays out here. And he's Jaden Daniels' only interception so far throughout training camp. It's only 3 days of practice, but still, Jaden Daniels is throwing a lot of passes. He's completed a lot of passes. Mike Davis is the only one to get the best of them at any point so far this in training camp. And then also we got to talk about Emanuel Forbes again, because we got more detail on the whole Emanuel Forbes transformation. So apparently Emanuel Forbes' size, of course, has been a major concern since he was drafted last year. But Quinn said that the cornerback worked on bulking up this season. Again, we did a full breakdown of that in day 2's breakdown of training camp. But today we got additional information. Dan Quinn said that Forbes put on 15 pounds over the summer. But then Forbes was quick to point out after that it was actually 17 pounds. He said, give me my extra 2. Give me my extra 2 pounds. I need that. And I'm not mad at him. But Dan Quinn said, quote, that's a big step in the right direction. So it's a matter of hitting all of the spots to go, tackling that part of the things. That's a big piece of it. But until you go through some of the games and you're not really able to demonstrate that, but you can show markers. My body feels different. I'm stronger. Those are things that lead up to that. But you still have to go do it, unquote. That was the Dan Quinn quote talking about Emanuel Forbes there. And Craig Hoffman brought up a great point. He said, I mentioned yesterday on TC, I thought Emanuel Forbes actually finally did look bigger. He's still thin, but that's just his body type. But from spring to now, he's definitely put on a little bit of bulk. And this is probably arguably the best news of training camp so far. Like, Emanuel Forbes weighing more than 185 pounds is big news, man. Like I said yesterday, he ran a 4.35 at the combine, and I'm perfectly fine with sacrificing some of that speed and now him running somewhere in the 4.4s after he gains much needed muscle and weight. Perfectly fine with that trade-off. Give back some of that speed to gain a lot more muscle and power. Let's do it. And I'm loving what I'm hearing and seeing so far from Emanuel Forbes, man. And you even have Cameron Curl. He even quote tweeted the picture of Emanuel Forbes you can see on the screen right now. And first of all, again, obviously, Emanuel Forbes is way bigger than what we were seeing earlier this offseason when he was standing next to the high school kid and he looked like the high school kid. There is a very noticeable difference. He has definitely gotten bigger. He's skinny, but you can tell that he's putting in the work. And we talked about in the breakdown of day 2 of practice that basically like steak and rice was the way that he was the food that he was eating to bulk up, but he was also putting a lot of work into the gym. But again, Cameron Curl even quote tweeted this and said, "My dog swole," with a laughing emoji and an arm emoji. So shouts out to Cameron Curl for still checking up on his boys and supporting them. I don't know if that was sarcasm, he was laughing at them or whatever. Either way though, the fact that Cameron Curl's keeping up with his old dogs, I think that's pretty cool. And then also shouts out to John Kahn for pointing this out. Regardless of how much Forbes weighs, he looked more aggressive in coverage Thursday versus Terry McLaurin. So even beyond the fact that he's gaining more weight, that's very important as well. Very, very important. I'm not trying to undersell that, but he's also going toe-to-toe with Terry McLaurin like we broke down after the day 2 practice, because I mean it was like one play he won the rep against Terry, then Terry beat him the next play, and then a couple of plays later Emanuel Forbes got him back. So that guy's going toe-for-toe. That's iron sharpening iron. I love it. And it's also obvious, just based on what we're seeing from Emanuel Forbes so far this offseason, very early, just only 3 days of training camp, but it's clearly obvious that Emanuel Forbes was not done any favors with the previous regime's management of the situation, their effort and development as far as getting him going, and then the scheme that they had him in. They didn't do him any favors. So it was obvious that Forbes was naturally going to look and be better under this Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. system, along with Jason Simmons' additional coaching. But he's already further ahead in his development than I expected. Because again, going toe-for-toe with Terry McLaurin is very impressive. Getting the best of him more than once in the practice, very impressive. And then the extra bulk is probably the catalyst for it. It's probably the reason that he is able to go toe-to-toe with Terry McLaurin, who's a very strong and aggressive receiver, even though he doesn't necessarily act like it vocally out loud. But when he's on that field, Terry McLaurin is a straight dog, Pierre Garçon type of guy. Now, moving on, speaking of DBs, Mike Sainristil crashed Jaden Daniels' press conference after practice. I love this moment. And basically he asked him, and Jaden Daniels is smiling and laughing the whole time before Mike Sainristil can even get the question all the way out. Once he saw it was Mike Sainristil with the microphone, Jaden Daniels just immediately ear to ear smiling, can't hold it in. So you can tell that they're clearly already close, and he thought that this was a funny question. But Mike asked Jaden Daniels, what would have happened if Michigan played LSU last year? As a Georgia Bulldog fan, I'm sitting on the sideline like, okay, yeah, interesting question, Mike. I want to know the same thing. I wish we could have simulated that somehow. But either way, Dan Quinn already compared Mike Sainristil and Jaden Daniels to each other, and the fact that you can already see them bonding this closely is even better. But again, Dan Quinn said specifically that both of these guys have a perfect balance of maturity beyond their years and humility. Like, it's just a great balance. But of course, Jaden Daniels didn't back down from the question. You know, he tried to PR it up a little bit, you know, go a little political, you know, kind of keep it, not get too brash with it, not get too arrogant. But he basically provided some stats, and at the end of it basically said that he thinks LSU would have beaten Mike's Michigan. Jaden Daniels' LSU would have beat Mike Sainristil's Michigan team last year if they would have ended up going head-to-head in some type of scenario. I guess maybe the playoffs if it were LSU rather than Alabama. But also another really interesting quote from Mike Sainristil that, I mean, I like this even more than the whole crashing Jaden Daniels' press conference. Yeah, it's great to see that bond, but I love this quote that he had after practice with Natalie Spalla, where he said, quote, "I don't have to act like a rookie just because I am a rookie," unquote. I love that. I've never heard a quote like that from a rookie before, and that just has me even more excited about him because he's going to be a day one starter, week one immediate impact. Chris Sims said that don't be surprised if Mike Sainristil ends up being the best, literally the #1 slot corner in the NFL within the next 2 years. Nick Saban said he was the best player pound for pound in the entire draft. You had Joe Platt saying that he was the best defensive player on the best defense in college football. He's going to be one of those guys that you can bet on being great at the NFL level. There are so many people that have high praise for him, and I just feel like that quote basically puts it all together as to why people are so high on him. I'm very high on him. I think he's going to play 70% of snaps day one every game. You can't take him off the field. He's too instinctual. Even at his small size, he can step up and make big plays against the run. I don't know how you take him off the field. I really do not. We have so much talent in the secondary. I just don't know how you're going to squeeze everybody in there, but we'll see. And then you you also had Tariq Castro-Fields. Speaking of talent in the secondary, this is a guy that's pretty far down the depth chart, but he had a really good pass break on Jaden Daniels to where he almost picked off Jaden Daniels. Mike Davis is the only one that actually has an interception on Jaden Daniels so far in training camp, but Tariq Castro-Fields almost got one, and he was defending Zach Ertz. So Jaden Daniels to Zach Ertz seems like one of those combinations right now that if I'm a DB, I don't want to have to deal with that. But Tariq Castro-Fields stepped up to the plate and almost got an interception off of it. And I do want to point out the fact that Tariq Castro-Fields has been running with the twos as the outside corner right now. So it's kind of been like Emanuel Forbes, St. Juice as your top two corners that are out there with the starters. Second team has basically been Tariq Castro-Fields and Mike Davis. And for some reason, that cornerback duo gave Jaden Daniels fits in day 3 of practice. Mike Davis got an interception on him, and Tariq Castro-Fields almost got one on him. So, hey, man, we may have better outside corner depth than we think. We may be 4 deep at outside corner. I personally got to see it to believe it. I'm really excited about Emanuel Forbes' transition from the Rivera and Jack Del Rio system to this Dan Quinn Joe Jr. system, with Jason Simmons also staying at late after practice to coach him up one-on-one and things like that. But as far as like the other guys in the cornerback room, we got to see. I want to be Mr. Optimistic like I always am. Maybe we'll see some of it early in the preseason, or even some of these joint practices coming up. We'll see how deep we really are at outside corner, because that's one of my biggest concerns. Left tackle, especially that left side of the offensive line, kicker, and also outside corner are my 3 biggest concerns of our team going into the season. The only things that will stop us from making the playoffs are those 3 things, in my opinion. So if outside corner we already have a fix without having to go into free agency, dive into that waiver wire to get it, I love it. Then you also have this clip right here of Jeremy Chinn and then Jeremy Reeves hitting the bags, and boy, I mean, there's nothing much to really take from this other than the fact that Chinn looks way bigger than Reeves in this clip, man. Like, Buddy is a different type of alien, man. Jeremy Chinn does not look like he's in the same position group as these other guys. He looks like a basketball player next to these guys, and the craziest part is that he's probably one of the fastest guys out of anybody that you see on this clip, even the guys that haven't even hit the bags yet. That's just insane, the type of athlete that Jeremy Chinn is. Now, before we get up out of here, we got to talk about special teams, of course. Can't go without at least trying to dive and dig for any special teams information I can get. I really don't want to go any breakdown without some type of special teams information. Well, Ben Standig pointed out the fact that the Commanders right now have kicker Ramiz Ahmed as our starting kicker and really our only kicker right now, but we do expect some competition at some point. Dan Quinn said preseason games will be key for field goals and seeing guys make field goals, but also the new kickoff rules as well. We got to see which kicker. Is it the guy that we already have in Ahmed, or is it potentially a new kicker that we bring in? Who's the best at kicking really well with these new kickoff rules? And Ben Standig also went on to add some patience will be required since many teams have multiple kickers in camp right now. There are several teams out there just being greedy, man, having several good kickers while we're struggling out here to find out if we even have one. And my boy Rio Robinson, make sure y'all subscribe to him, of course, follow him on Twitter, all of that. He brought up a great point, man. I completely agree. He said, can we get a video of someone making a field goal at camp, please? Kicker is quietly a huge concern for this team. Do we know if these fellas can even do it, basically? And I'm right with them. Why have we not gotten a single clip of the kicker situation right now? We haven't seen one highlight of a kicker kicking a field goal from any of these guys that have been going to practice every day, all of these different reporters. There's like double-digit reporters going to these practices and uploading the clips on Twitter and things like that. I haven't seen one kick from anybody. And also, to make matters worse, just to let you know, Lions kicker Michael Badgley tore his hamstring in Thursday's practice, so he's gone on the injured reserve and will probably miss the entire season. And the Lions are the same people that took Jake Bates from us, but now they probably need another kicker to bring in to compete with Jake Bates, because he is coming from the UFL, and even though he looks like a high ceiling, very high potential, great kicker in the making, I mean, he's still unproven at the NFL level. Can he do it at the NFL level? So now we have another team competing with us trying to get another kicker. Craig Hoffman brought up a great point. This is not ideal for the Commanders, as another team now needs a kicker as well. Quinn said this morning they'd like to eventually get some competition in the camp. But hey, man, this is not a great situation. But shouts out to my boy Serge the Shooter, who was at practice today getting some elite photos of the practice. So if you want to see any elite photos of what the Commanders have going on, like, I mean, he's the best photographer doing it in the organization, in my opinion. Make sure you go follow him. But he replied to Rio's tweet that I talked about just a couple of minutes ago and said, I mean, you know, if he was like out there not doing well, the media was probably let you know by now. So he basically doesn't even think that there's really much competition for him right now. It's just him, and he's basically insinuating that maybe Ahmed has actually been kicking fairly well. He even has a snapshot of Ahmed. He has like a really good clip of him, like, well, picture standstill of him like kicking a kick, making a field goal, I'm assuming. And I think he brings up a great point that if Ahmed was messing up, and if it were like a major concern, maybe the media would be talking about it. But at the same time, I'm still concerned. I mean, he may have a point there. I guess we'll see in joint practices of the preseason at the soonest what's going on. But I also feel like, man, we can't get at least one clip so far. So I'm in between Rio and Serge the Shooter there. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content, man. I really appreciate y'all. Of course, I'm gonna keep y'all updated on everything training camp. Even if I'm a little bit late, I promise y'all I'm coming with that breakdown eventually. Even if it is the next very morning. I woke up at 5 something to get this done. I had all of my notes ready, but I just ended up super busy with my family and everything like that. And then by the time we were done, I literally just passed out. And then I just woke up at 5 a.m. in the morning. I was like, let me go ahead and get this done. So I appreciate y'all patience waiting on me to come out with this day 3 breakdown of training camp. I really appreciate the support. Make sure you do not leave this video without leaving a like. And of course, let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Are you going to overreact to Jaden Daniels throwing an interception? Do you think this is something we really need to look into? Do you feel like these outside corners are better than advertised? Do you feel like it's time for Brandon Coleman to start getting starting reps more often? How do you feel about Emanuel Forbes getting bigger and Cameron Curl even shouting them out and acknowledging it? How do you feel about Jeremy McNichols emerging as our third best running back in the entire room? How do you feel about the D-line looking so explosive and how their drills just look way more energetic than I ever remember with the previous regime? How do you feel about the wide receiver depth and competition we have going on right now? Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video and more. Any topics that I didn't discuss, let me know in the comment section. Let me know if there are any things that you want me to really dive into the next training camp battle, things that I really need to pay attention to specifically, like maybe pay more attention at a certain position group that I didn't necessarily do so in my first 3 training camp breakdowns. So let me know how you feel about everything. I'm gonna try my best to try to read and reply to as many comments as possible. I really appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. Stay tuned for the next breakdown. I'm out.